February 11th, 1990, Tokyo, Japan. Mike Tyson walked into the ring as the undefeated heavyweight champion of the world. 37 fights, 37 victories, 33 knockouts. And at just 23 years old, Tyson wasn't simply beating heavyweight contenders. He was absolutely terrifying them. Some opponents looked defeated before the opening bell. Odds makers reportedly had Tyson as roughly 42-1 favorite against the man standing across from him. That man being James Buster Douglas, a talented heavyweight, but a man almost nobody believed could actually win. Douglas wasn't supposed to become champion that night. He was supposed to become another name on Mike Tyson's knockout resume. Instead, less than an hour later, Mike Tyson was crawling around the canvas trying to find his mouthpiece, and the most feared fighter on the planet was no longer undefeated. This is the story of the night Mike Tyson lost his invincibility. Now, to understand why Douglas beating Tyson was so shocking, you have to understand what Mike Tyson represented in 1990. Tyson wasn't viewed like a normal heavyweight champion. He looked inevitable. Under the guidance of legendary trainer Cus D'Amato, Tyson developed a style perfectly suited to his physical abilities. Tyson wasn't particularly tall for a heavyweight, but that became an advantage. He stayed low, moved his head, exploded inside, and once he got into punching range, everything changed. Tyson could throw a left hook to the body, come upstairs with another hook, then finish with a right hand before his opponent could even reset. And the speed was ridiculous. Heavyweights weren't supposed to be moving like this. They definitely weren't supposed to punch like this while moving that quickly. Tyson began collecting knockouts, one after another. And in November 1986, at just 20 years old, Tyson stopped Trevor Berbick to become the youngest heavyweight champion in boxing history. But Tyson wasn't finished. He wanted every belt. He defeated James Bone Crusher Smith, Tony Tucker, Larry Holmes, Tony Tubbs, Michael Spinks, and the Spinks fight became one of the defining moments of Tyson's aura. Michael Spinks entered undefeated. The fight lasted 91 seconds. That was it. Tyson destroyed him. And after that, the question surrounding Tyson wasn't who's going to beat him. It became, is anyone capable of beating him? There are champions and there are fighters whose reputation becomes part of their weaponry. Tyson had reached that second category. His ring walk was simple. No elaborate performance, no smile, no attempt to entertain the crowd. He walked toward the ring looking like he had somewhere to be. Then the bell rang and somebody usually got hurt. And that's important because boxing is psychological. You can lose a fight before the first punch is even thrown. And Tyson's opponents knew exactly what happened to the men who came before them. They'd seen the knockouts. They'd seen the fighters overwhelmed. They'd seen Tyson turn world-class heavyweights into highlight reels. So when some fighters entered the ring against Mike, they weren't simply fighting Tyson. They were fighting the idea of Mike Tyson. And that's what made February 1990 so unbelievable, because Buster Douglas didn't appear interested in the mythology. By the time Tyson arrived in Tokyo, things behind the scenes had completely changed. Cus D'Amato had died in 1985. Tyson later split with trainer Kevin Rooney. His personal life had become chaotic. His marriage to Robin Givens had ended publicly. There were questions surrounding his training and his preparation. And Tyson's team wasn't operating with the same stability that had surrounded him during his rise. That's something we have to be careful with when telling this story, because it's easy to rewrite history and say Tyson lost because he wasn't prepared. That explanation is too simple. Tyson's preparation mattered, but Buster Douglas still had to beat him, and Douglas had his own story entering that ring. James Buster Douglas wasn't some random guy they pulled off the street. He could fight. He was 6'4", had a long reach and a strong jab, and when focused, Douglas possessed legitimate heavyweight talent. The problem was consistency. Early in his career, Douglas had opportunities to establish himself at the highest level, but he developed a reputation for not always delivering when it mattered most. And now they wanted him to fight Mike Tyson, the undefeated champion, the destroyer, the man who demolished Michael Spinks in 91 seconds. Most people thought they knew how this story would end, but Douglas entered the fight carrying something Tyson couldn't see on a tail of the tape graphic, that being grief. Douglas's mother, Lula Pearl, had died only weeks before the fight, and instead of breaking him, Douglas later described her death as additional motivation. He wasn't traveling to Tokyo simply to survive. He believed he could win. From the opening round, something looked different. Douglas was not intimidated. He used his jab again and again and again. Instead of standing directly in front of Tyson and allowing Mike to explode inside, Douglas used his size. He controlled the distance. He moved. And whenever Tyson attempted to close the gap, Douglas made him work. This is where the technical brilliance of Douglas's performance gets overlooked. People remember the upset. They remember Tyson getting knocked out, but Douglas didn't win because of one lucky punch. He was outboxing Mike Tyson. His jab disrupted Tyson's rhythm. His reach forced Tyson to cover distance. And Douglas wasn't simply retreating, he was landing combinations. Tyson kept coming forward, but the clean, destructive attacks people were accustomed to seeing weren't apparent with the same frequency. Round after round, something previously unimaginable became increasingly obvious. Buster Douglas wasn't surviving Mike Tyson. He was beating Mike Tyson. As the fight progressed, Douglas continued landing. Tyson's left eye began swelling, and the chaos in Tyson's corner became part of the story. Instead of having a traditional Onswell available for the swelling, Tyson's corner famously used a makeshift cold press. Think about the symbolism of that. This was the heavyweight champion of the world, one of the biggest athletes on earth, and during the biggest crisis of his professional career, his corner looked unprepared. Meanwhile, Douglas kept boxing. Jab, combination, move, reset. Jab, combination, move, reset. The monster was beginning to look human. But then, Mike Tyson reminded everyone exactly why he was Mike Tyson. Late in the 8th round, Tyson finally found his opening. Douglas threw an uppercut, Tyson avoided it, then Tyson fired his own devastating right uppercut. And boom, just like that, Douglas went down. And suddenly the entire fight changed. After everything Douglas had accomplished, after controlling the fight, after proving Tyson could be hit, Mike Tyson had put him on the canvas. Douglas remained down as the referee counted. He watched the count, gathered himself, and got back to his feet at 9. The bell came shortly afterward. Douglas survived. And this moment will later become controversial because Tyson's camp argued Douglas received a long count. But regardless of the controversy, Douglas was still standing. And psychologically, something important had happened. Tyson had landed the punch that was supposed to end the story, and Douglas got back up. Imagine what Douglas could have done after that round. He could have become cautious. He could have decided he'd already proven everyone wrong. He could have spent the rest of the fight simply trying to survive. Instead, he came back fighting. Douglas resumed using his jab and combinations, and Tyson was increasingly damaged. By this point, the fight wasn't about whether Douglas belonged in the ring anymore. Now there was another question. Could Buster Douglas actually finish Mike Tyson? Nobody had ever done it. Tyson had never lost. He had never been knocked out. But in round 10, history arrived. Douglas lands an uppercut. Tyson's head snaps upward. Then comes the combination. Left, right, left. And suddenly, Mike Tyson falls. The undefeated heavyweight champion is on the canvas. But this doesn't look like Douglas's knockdown. Tyson is hurt badly. He reaches around the canvas. His mouthpiece had fallen out. He finds it, attempts to put it back into his mouth, and Tyson desperately tries to stand. He gets up, but it's too late. The referee waves the fight off. Buster Douglas has knocked out Mike Tyson. For the first time in his professional career, Mike Tyson had lost. The boxing world couldn't believe it. This wasn't supposed to happen. Tyson was expected to defeat Douglas and continue toward another massive fight. Instead, the heavyweight division had been turned upside down. The supposed tune-up opponent had just beaten the most feared boxer alive. And this wasn't a questionable decision. Douglas didn't run away and steal rounds. He didn't win because Tyson was disqualified. He knocked Mike Tyson out. And that distinction matters because Douglas didn't simply expose a weakness. For one night, he beat Mike Tyson everywhere. He jabbed better. He controlled the distance. He landed combinations. He survived Tyson's biggest moment, and then he finished them. Was Tyson really at his best? This is where the debate has survived for decades. Tyson supporters will point towards his preparation, his changing team, his personal problems, the decline in discipline following the departure of people like Kevin Rooney. And there's the truth here. The Mike Tyson who fought Buster Douglas didn't appear as sharp as the version who destroyed Michael Spinks. But here's the problem. Sometimes explaining an upset accidentally becomes an attempt to erase the winner. Buster Douglas didn't control Tyson's training camp. He didn't control Tyson's corner. He didn't create Tyson's personal problems. Douglas simply fought the man standing across from him. And on February 11, 1990, Buster Douglas was better. That's sports. The greatest athletes don't get judged based on what they theoretically could have done under the perfect circumstance. Eventually, somebody has to perform. Douglas did, Tyson didn't. Douglas became heavyweight champion, but his reign wouldn't last long. Later that year, Douglas faced Evander Holyfield. Holyfield knocked him out in the third round. And just like that, Douglas's championship reign was over. Tyson's story became considerably darker and more complicated afterward. He returned to boxing and began winning again. He eventually regained heavyweight champion later in the decade, but the aura was never exactly the same. Before Douglas, Tyson seemed inevitable. After Douglas, every future opponent knew something important. Mike Tyson could be beaten. He could be hurt. He could be knocked down. He could be knocked out. And once the illusion of invincibility disappears, you can never completely rebuild it. Buster Douglas never became an all-time great heavyweight champion. He didn't build a decade-long dynasty. He didn't become the face of boxing. But for one night, he didn't need to, because February 11, 1990 became bigger than Buster Douglas's overall career. It became the ultimate example of why sports are unpredictable. Douglas entered the ring as an enormous underdog. He was facing an undefeated champion in his physical prime. Almost everyone expected him to lose. And instead of fighting scared, Douglas produced arguably the greatest performance of his life at exactly the moment he needed it. That's why calling this simply Mike Tyson losing misses half the story. This was Buster Douglas winning. Every dominant athlete eventually encounters the moment when people realize they're human. For Mike Tyson, that moment happened in Tokyo. Before February 11, 1990, Tyson's greatest weapon might not have been his left hook, or his uppercut, or his speed. It might have been fear. Opponents had watched what happened to everyone else, and many entered the ring already wondering how long they could survive. Buster Douglas entered wondering how could he win, and that's the difference. He got hit, he got knocked down, he watched the referee counting above him, and he stood back up. Then he did something nobody had ever done before. He knocked Mike Tyson out. Tyson would continue fighting, he would become champion again, he would remain one of the most famous athletes in the world, and decades later, people would still debate how great the prime version of Mike Tyson truly was. But the mythical version, the unbeatable version, the version opponents seemingly feared before they even entered the ring, Buster Douglas left that version of Mike Tyson on the canvas in Tokyo. One fight, one night, one of the greatest upsets in sports history, and the moment the baddest man on the planet finally looked human.